Hi, folks. I'm Marcel, and you're watching The Pulse. Today, I'm going to talk about some topics that run counter to what I believed for the past several months and even the last couple years about NAD boosting. I have sort of realigned my definition of what I am and who we are. And I always sort of viewed us as self-prescribing patients, maybe ambitious people, maybe experimentals. But more and more, I think it's fair to use the term for myself and the 1,000 other people that have tried NMN, at least that many, based on this channel, of which 800 have had positive results, which is pretty amazing. That's pretty good efficacy. But basically, we're such a small group, we're operating outside the norms. And I think we're essentially, it's fair to call us biohackers. I don't mean that in the term that, obviously we're not taking dangerous drugs or we're not hacking our DNA necessarily, but we're experimenting to see, based on research, we're not doing this just blind, hopefully, but based on the research mostly coming out of David Sinclair's lab, and we're trying the things that he claims he's trying. I mean, he's really the most glorified biohacker of us all, but he still is. Because by his own admission, there's no definitive research yet. There's no gold standard scientific white paper based on a placebo-controlled double-blind test that has been peer-reviewed. There is no and repeated also, and then peer-reviewed. There's no definitive proof that NMN or sirtuin activators or any of this stuff truly does all of the things it seems to imply in animal and model organism research. And I've always sort of been curious why more doctors hadn't been trying NAD boosting with their patients. My wife is a speech therapist, and she treats many patients for speech disorders related to various illnesses such as Parkinson's, dementia, stroke sufferers, ALS. She has currently a patient with ALS. And she would come home and describe their symptoms and how frustrating it is to see them declining. And basically, there's no answer for them. And out of my own experiences, I would always ask her, I would ask myself, but I would ask her sometimes out loud, why they don't try NMN. Well, I'm a licensed speech therapist. I can't recommend that they go try anything. And I know that. It's just a rhetorical question that I keep asking. Why? Why aren't doctors giving this a chance when so many people, albeit anecdotally, have had such positive results for similar types of symptoms, even though they're more of a lesser extent or a lesser degree in most cases? It's reversed a lot of such symptoms: cognitive decline, energy levels, chronic fatigue, so many things that have benefited, granted, mostly at a reduced level, but have benefited by boosting NAD levels by taking NMN, in some cases NR, which I don't discount, by the way. Get your NAD levels up. I talk about the AMPK pathway a lot. I talk about recycling NAD. I talk about exercise. I talk about wellness. And I'll continue to talk about those things because they can all impact your NAD levels positively. Well, I didn't reach out sooner and investigate NAD injections because of a podcast from David Sinclair where, in my view, he sort of really just discounted the effectiveness of such treatments. Here's a video clip.
Why don't we just give NAD directly? We talk about like NAD boosters. NR creates NMN, NMN creates NAD, that boosts NAD. Or NMN boosts NAD, but it all gets us to NAD, so why don't we just, set up the drip line and get it going?
Well, we don't, but others do. There's a lot of activity going on in Florida and LA particularly, of having large drips, long drips of over an hour of NAD. up to a gram.
These are not in study settings. This is not in a research setting. This is like people trying this out.
Well, they're done under medical supervision, but I haven't yet seen a placebo-controlled trial that would tell us for sure if it's just wishful thinking or not. I don't think so, given how many people have been now treated, and there's a serious amount of anecdotal data on this, better mood, better energy. But, you cannot conclude anything unless you actually have one of these placebo-controlled trials. I'd love to be involved. If anybody's going to do one, I'd love to help. But I'm asked this probably every day, NAD IVs, do they work? And my answer has to be, we don't know yet.
What do we think they might be? I mean, what are people trying them for?
Well, they're used for various things. It's been used for many years to treat addiction, whether it's drug or alcohol. It's also used for depression and also increasingly for hangovers.
Is it as good as the Australian hangover cure that you've given me a few times?
Oh, the raw egg and the Vegemite?
Yeah.
I hope it's better than that. But the idea...
Because the truth is that doesn't work. I just pretend it works because it makes you happy.
That's true. And you're one of the few people that eats my Vegemite. But the reason that it probably works is there's an enzyme that detoxifies alcohol called alcohol dehydrogenase. And a lot of Asians are susceptible to high levels of alcohol because they lack a lot of this enzyme. Alcohol dehydrogenase needs NAD. And so what's probably happening is when you wake up with a hangover, you lack NAD, your liver is depleted, and if you take NMN or NR, you can raise those levels back up, get your liver working again, and get rid of the excess alcohol.
So he started out by talking about addiction, and but it seemed like to me, I mean, it was pretty obvious that the discussion devolved into really diminishing the possibilities of NAD injections, direct injections, or infusions as sort of this wacko thing that only goes on in hippie doctor places like Florida or LA. Sorry if you're a doctor in Florida or LA, but that's how it came across to me. And even worse is the discussion, the 2 minutes that he gave out of hours of a podcast, the 2 minutes that he dedicated to talking about NAD injections or infusions. They're two different things. I'll break that down more as we go forward. He sort of just diminished them into hangover cures, even starting to talk about raw eggs and Vegemite, almost as if I had this vision in my mind of these clinics being something like the veterinary clinics on Better Call Saul, where someone gets a gunshot wound, they don't want to go to the hospital because, it happened sort of under illegal circumstances. So, they don't want to get reported to the cops, so they go see this animal doctor. They go in the back door, they get rung in. I had this vision of a Mercedes pulling up outside of a hippie doctor animal clinic, in Florida, where he comes in the back door and he gets his infusion and then he goes and makes his tea time. But I still got curious about NAD injections because they'd come up in my news feed, my Google feed, my YouTube feed. And yeah, they kind of fit the bill. When I would look at them, at the videos that have been made, they're not really compelling, scientific, or convincing patient-doctor videos, at least what I've seen so far. But I wrote to one clinic in Beverly Hills, a plastic surgery clinic on Wilshire Boulevard. I mentioned that I had an interview coming up, some Q&A coming up with Dr. Daniel Barrett soon. He's been giving NAD injections to patients to help them recover from surgery. One of the things that David Sinclair talks about is, we don't yet know if wound recovery will be sped up by NAD. Yet, here's a plastic surgeon having results with patients.
What we found is it not only can it help with aging, but it also helps with recovery after surgery. And that's one of the big things that I have, because one of their limitations for getting surgery is they don't want that massive recovery. And if their NAD is boosted up, especially if they're older, they tend to recover better. It tends to boost their immune system. They get less, there's no studies on this, but less infections and things like that. So that's why we started offering it in the office through the research that's been out there, my personal experience, and the results that I'm getting from my patients.
And another email I sent went out to a company called NAD Clinic. They're based in London and Cape Town, South Africa, and have an office in Munich. not too far away from where I am here in Germany. What I got back from those 2 emails has really, over the past few weeks, amounted to an avalanche of information and positive information regarding the efficacy and results of NAD injections, and especially NAD infusions, which do take longer and are more involved and more expensive. But according to tests, NAD blood tests, in-person blood tests, we're not talking about the kind that I've done where you mail it in, but we're talking about a real test in a lab. It's been shown that with patients, with actual human beings, the fastest way and most effective way to raise NAD levels in their patients has been from infusions, which runs counter to what was described by David Sinclair as NMN being a more efficient way to raise NAD levels. These clinics are getting results that are quite astonishing. The head science officer, whom I also spoke with at NAD Clinic, is Philip Scheutle, and Philip talks about a faster recovery time. Now, he's an orthopedic surgeon who also works with stem cells and has worked extensively with stem cell research. Philip, are you still involved with stem cell research or therapies in parallel to this?
Yeah. I'm still doing fat-derived mesenchymal stem cell treatments for focal lesions in the musculoskeletal, meaning orthopedic sports, regenerating, for example, fresh ruptured anterior cruciate ligaments, increased healing of meniscus, but it's also used by partners of mine for hair growth, scar, etc. But for the systemic part, meaning everything I need to get into the blood circulation, this is what we call systemic. I use NAD+.
Do you use these treatments together? Forgive me if I'm asking remedial questions at times.
Yeah. The thing is, we nowadays, or I have seen that the use of NAD+ after surgeries, because I'm still also doing orthopedic interventions, is increasing the healing time significantly by different factors, because the NAD+ has different functions in our body, and all of them together improve healing. So by use the stem cells in a focal area, maybe a joint or part of the skin or whatever, NAD helps the whole body, the whole system.
So he's a quite accomplished orthopedic surgeon who cuts people open a lot, wants their wounds. It's very important for not only plastic surgeons to get a better result. If the wound heals faster, you get less scar tissue, you get a better result. With orthopedic surgery, the joints and the bones and the tissue around the joints heals faster, you get a better result. It doesn't sort of lock in place and people get stiff and have to do extensive physical therapy to start using those joints again. So it's very important that you get a fast, effective recovery time, and NAD has been helping them in their clinics with both of those types of recovery. So that's efficacy. Right? Efficacy is not that you cured a disease, and efficacy is scientific. Matter of fact, it's the gold standard for medicinal science. It's patient efficacy. It's not double-blind tests. This is very important for research science to prove a theory in a research facility. But, worms don't talk to you. Mice don't talk to you. Patients can talk to you. And if a patient says, I feel great, that's a positive result. If a patient says, I'm able to use my leg again, after 2 weeks instead of 4, where most patients take 4 weeks to recover and say the same thing, that's a positive result. That's efficacy. What blew my mind was the scope and scale of these NAD clinics. It is not in line with what David Sinclair described as this sort of rogue clinics almost. He didn't say that. He didn't use the word rogue, but he said Florida and LA specifically. It's going on mostly in Florida and LA. It's just not true. When I talked to the CEO of NAD Clinic, and he said, well, listen to him.
I can be really specific about the US market because it was we researched this a couple of months ago, actually. And to give you some of the idea of how the growth is aligned with this, is when I started in 2015, I think there was 5 clinics offering NAD plus IV specifically in the US, and the number as of a couple of months ago is over 1,100 now in the US.
Amazing.
And I believe
7 years.
in 7 years, and the number of IV infusions, NAD plus IV infusions, is over 10,000 administered daily.
So 1,100 clinics offering over 10,000 injections a day just in the U.S., and it's been growing exponentially. They went from 5 clinics, as he said, to 1,100 in just 7 years in the U.S. alone. And his company's just based in South Africa and Europe, and he's growing 2 to 4 clinics a month in these areas, and has his eye on the U.S. market because NAD Clinic offers testing, protocols, a lot more than just a vial of NAD, and they offer different types of NAD treatments, and they're growing their list of products. So it's a company that is pretty highly respected and well put together, having seen the list of the neurologists and the nutritionists and the doctors and nurses that they employ. It's pretty high level. It's medical oversight, as David Sinclair described, but it's pretty high level medical oversight. And my conversation with Dr. Scheutler was just incredible because he talked about the effects of it. We got even into the topic, the disputed topic of how NAD gets into the cell. Like, can it get into the cell? Do you have to break it down first to NMN? Well, the body can do that. The body does that, it turns out. And he named off the top of his head 3 different pathways for NAD to get directly into the cell. It turns out that the cell has these neurotransmitters that are actually looking for NAD. So the cells want NAD. And of course, they're going to find a way to accommodate it and get it in the cell once it's in the bloodstream. So it is not this difficult thing, at least in a practical sense. What these doctors are basically employing in these clinics around the world, these 1,100 clinics in the U.S. and growing fast, what they're basically employing is evidence-based practice, which is we're taking the research, we're taking it a step further, we're giving it to patients, and then we're asking the patients, how do you feel? How you doing? Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Do you feel the same? Are you having any side effects? And overwhelmingly, and that would be how they're determining the efficacy, but overwhelmingly, for a laundry list of diseases and conditions, patients are experiencing positive results. So I'm going to go down the list a little bit here. Some of them include, but not limited to, chronic fatigue, menopause, andropause, stress and anxiety, anti-aging, alcohol and prescription drug detox. Now that one is a special one for me because I've always been skeptical of a lot of prescription drugs because I think you're just replacing one of these other conditions, especially as someone who was given several different prescription drugs for anxiety, and I had side effects from each of the prescription drugs. I ended up taking nothing and just dealing with it. I think I settled on an occasional Xanax, which I was told was highly addictive. So what they're saying at the NAD clinic is if you have any of these conditions, NAD injections is showing efficacy. It's showing very positive results. And if you've taken a prescription drug and become addicted to it, well, NAD can help with that too. So you're really just you're replacing one condition with another when you take a prescription drug. But when you treat these conditions with NAD+, you're treating it systemically. And that means that you get this downstream effect of improving the condition along with multiple conditions and the energy level and the mitochondria. I mean, multiple things happen. It becomes intervention/prevention. And I've always said that taking NMN to boost NAD was a great prevention for illness. But sometimes you need something more ambitious than just prevention. I really believe that the evidence that they're seeing with these conditions is further evidence to take NMN. So while some of you may have thought I'm going to, discount NMN, I'm actually a bigger believer in NMN. and the benefits of raising NAD levels. I'm just put off by the fact that nobody's talking about these 1,100 clinics. Beyond the NAD clinic, other clinics are treating surgery recovery, long COVID. Listen to what Dr. Daniel Barrett said about his own case of long COVID.
I do know firsthand its benefits, okay? I do feel like I've been battling long COVID symptoms, and I've tried everything, okay? I was getting sick every couple of weeks and so forth. I looked up the lupus protocol, which is 3 NAD IV drips in a week, followed by 1 IV drip once a week for 3 weeks after. And then I also noted that UCLA is actually studying long COVID and NAD drips as a therapy. And it does supercharge your immune system. NAD basically supercharges every single cell in your body, from your brain to your gut, to your immune system, to your muscles. And so I did that. I followed the lupus recovery protocol, and now I'm still continuing that. And literally my symptoms that I attributed to long COVID reversed literally 180 after getting an IV drip.
So based on research at UCLA, a nearby, worldwide respected institution that isn't even talking about giving NAD injections publicly that I could find, is doing it where a local doctor heard about it locally in LA, decided to try it on himself, and had 180-degree improvement, 180-degree change from one transfusion. You could see how efficacy would be through the roof with NAD injections or infusions if it only takes one treatment to feel results. And the patient's like, wow, okay. So that's how evidence-based practices work. A patient gets sick. My wife had a really good question. It's like, how are all these clinics finding out? How are all these patients finding out about NAD injections? Well, it's not that you find out and you go get it. What happens is you get sick, you go to a doctor, and the doctor gives you a list. He checks you out, does some blood tests, and then he says, okay, we've got some treatments. These are your options. And he starts to break them down. Some will be pharmaceutical, some may be dietary changes to your diet and exercise. And more, increasingly so, some doctors, more and more doctors at more and more clinics are offering as an option for many of these conditions NAD injection or infusion. And what do they say to them? They're saying, well, I've given this, it's not there's no definitive scientific evidence yet that it reverses the condition. But what we found is that it seems to be systemic, meaning it treats multiple illnesses at the source, the cells themselves, and people are experiencing great rebounds from this. They're experiencing what I've experienced from taking NMN, what many of you have experienced from taking NMN. So when I had this first conversation with Ian de Havilland, I was shocked that he described NAD injections as being on every corner in the U.S. I was shocked at the scope and scale of it. And he was shocked. He was equally shocked. We had this really weird moment of our conversation. This is not recorded. This was our initial pre-call conversation. And he couldn't believe that I didn't know more, being an NMN guy with all these videos and all these subscribers, that I hadn't heard more about these NAD clinics. He seemed mystified by this. He's like, it's everywhere. You're American. Your audience is in America. They're on every street corner. And what I explained to him is there's large swaths of America with streets that have no corners because you go for miles before you hit another street. But in the city centers, he was right. And even when he said it, I didn't believe it. So he's in every city in America. It's just matter of fact. I couldn't believe it because David Sinclair told me it was Florida and LA, the wacko hippies, the animal clinics, the back door. So I got on Google. It's like, it just blows my mind how all you have to do is try a teeny bit and you get information. Just try a teeny bit. It's so lazy what so many doctors and scientists and so many people who are giving us information are doing us an injustice because they're not taking a little bit of effort. And I've been guilty as well by not researching this more soon and sooner. I started to type in cities. So, I wanted to test this whole, is it really just LA and Florida, David? Well, turns out I typed in Chicago. I mean, that's a big city, certainly. As I would have expected, NAD clinics all over town. I mean, clinics offering NAD injections. So then I typed in Memphis, Tennessee. NAD clinics all over town. And I typed in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You're really going out there, right? Many of you may never have heard of Fort Wayne, Indiana. NAD options all over the city. Portland, Oregon. It's another part of the country. It's pretty far from Florida and LA, if you're familiar with U.S. geography. NAD clinics all over town. Portland, Maine, which started to autofill. I thought, okay, this will be funny. How about Portland, Maine? Are there any NAD injections available in Portland, Maine? All over town. Little Rock, Arkansas. Doesn't get any non-Florida, non-LA than Little Rock, Arkansas. NAD clinics all over town. How about Hot Springs, Arkansas? It's a town where my dad's from. It's 35,000. Certainly, there's no NAD clinics there. Well, there's NAD clinics on the north side of town, the south side of town, the west side, east side of town, every part of town. You got an NAD option. Hot Springs, Arkansas. So something is wrong with the flow of information. And they're not opening up these clinics all over the country. They're not new clinics. They're existing treatment centers for various. You can look them up. You'll see everything. You'll see addiction. You'll see Parkinson's. You'll see everything. All the conditions I mentioned here, they're treating them with NAD injections. It's an option. It's on their menu, right? It's available to them. And it's being administered, injections and infusions, every day, all over the country. I'm going to be talking more about this topic going forward. Suffice to say, I feel disappointed and misled. I'm asking the question, not so dissimilar to what my wife asked me, like, how are people hearing about it? But I'm asking, like, why is no one talking about it? Where's the Surgeon General? Where's the National Institute of Health? Why is there no spokesman for the clinics in America mentioning that this is such a fastly growing and high efficacy rate treatment for so many diseases that have no treatment, that have no cure, supposedly? Yet if you catch these things early, they're reversing the effects of Parkinson's. If you catch it early, they're reversing. It's dramatic what they're reporting. Dramatic. And it really pains me that, Joe Rogan's not talking about it. Andrew Huberman's not talking about it. Brad Stanfield's not talking about it. Lex Friedman's not talking about it. And even closer to home, David Sinclair's not talking about it. But I'm talking about it. And I'm going to keep talking about it until more people are talking about it. NAD injections have a very high efficacy rate, are available in cities across the country and around the world, and people need to know this. They need to know this, and it does lend a lot more credence to those of us biohackers taking NMN and getting results. We don't need to feel so bad. We're not alone, and now we know there are thousands of doctors and clinics around the world offering these treatments for diseases. It was unknown to me. I don't know how it slipped by me that it was on such a wide, broad scale. I don't know why it feels like the information's being suppressed, but I'm going to make sure that we shed more light on it and we inform more people about it. See you soon. Thanks for watching.